to start with. We're not expecting a fire drill today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave the building by either of those two doors and gather at the safe fire point, which is in the main staff car park at the rear of the Dean House. This meeting will be recorded and streamed to YouTube. Therefore, any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded, even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes you any concern, could you please let me know now? We are reviewing our planning service, and it would be appreciated if the public present today would complete the questionnaires available in the room to help us improve our service to you. Can I please also request that the committee members complete the same questionnaire at the conclusion of the meeting, and let us have it, give it back to staff members. Thank you. Okay. So, Martin, apologies for absence, item 1.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from 5 councillors: Caroline Ellis, Dixie Darch, Ross Henley, Andy Sully and Derek Perry. Councillor Dawn Johnson is substituting for Caroline Ellis. Thank you,
Thank you. Okay, minutes from the previous meeting. Is it your request? Shall I sign those as a true record of that meeting? I have a proposer, please. Thank you, Sarah. Seconder, thank you for the, and can I see those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried. Thank you. I will do that. Right. Okay, declarations of interest. I'll start from the chair. I had a conversation yesterday with a member of the team that is supporting the application at Monkton Heathfield, a gentleman by the name of Dan Angel, who I believe is likely to come to be at this meeting and also speak to us. I didn't go into any great detail of the application, merely that it was here and we would hear it today. But for fullness sake, I declare that I've had that conversation. And also that I obviously, because the landowner is married to Caroline Ellis, I know the owner of the applicant, the landowner of the application 5 on our agenda, 5 and 6 on our agenda today. But I've not discussed this planning application with any time, either of them actually.
Item 5 and 6, I know the landowner. I don't consider it as potential interest. Thank you.
So,
yes, I also know the landowner for application 5 and 6. I haven't discussed it with them, didn't know anything about it until today, actually.
Andy Hadley.
Yes, I've received several emails regarding item 7, I think it is.
Minehead.
Yeah, the one in Minehead. I've received emails, but I haven't commented on them.
Thank you for that. And Norman Cabell. Okay, duly noted. Martin.
Just we'll record those interests just for committee's attention. We've previously been using personal and prejudicial to declare interest, but actually under the new adopted code there are different terms of reference. But we understand, for example, Councillor Cabell, your interest is another registrable interest under the new code, so we'll record it that way. So we may need to do some external more training on code of conduct, because the phrases and the terminology that members have been used to have changed since April, and we'll record those in the minutes now.
Okay, can I please make a plea, Martin, that we organise that training as soon as possible, because we're declaring them in good faith. I want to make sure that they are actually accurate. Thank you. Dawn, Will, and then.
So I'm just checking that I don't need to declare that I know the people in the house at 5 and 6, even though I've not spoken to them about this issue. It is supposedly on.
Off.
Thank you. It will depend on whether your knowledge of the applicant or the landowner or an objector or supporter to an application is what's called a close associate. So if they were a family member or a close friend, then that would be deemed a close associate. And what the Code of Conduct says there is that in those circumstances, the perception is that you may, the councillor may not be able to approach a planning application with an open mind. If the person is just an acquaintance that you know, that wouldn't be a close associate, and you would not be required in those circumstances to declare an interest. It's down to individual members each time to declare or to decide with their own knowledge of the relationship between the individual.
So I think it gets very grey, doesn't it, in areas, because if they're a working associate and somebody you work with.
And declare it and
Okay, so I'll declare it, but I haven't discussed this item in any way, shape or form.
Chair, and just needs to be clear, there's a difference between code interest where you are a close associate, so you have a close friend or a family member, where the perception is you shouldn't be sitting on in judgment on a planning application, whatever, whether you've discussed it with them or not. So the individuals involved in the applications on the agenda today, if you feel any of them are close associates, then you should declare that as an interest. And the advice is that in those circumstances, you shouldn't take part in the debate and vote on those items. That's different from discussing a matter, as the Chairman sort of indicated earlier, where you're in danger of predetermining the application and being seen to have closed your mind to it. And those are two completely different things. So one is a code interest and one is predetermination.
I'm just going to assume, Dawn, that you're content that you can approach this application with an open mind. Thank you. Will.
Okay, on the question of predetermination, I sat on the planning committee when this arrived last time. And I think we're the only two, aren't we, Simon? It looks to me that there's very little has fundamentally changed. I'm quite happy to say I'm approaching this with an open mind. But I'm also slightly baffled as to why it's suddenly come back. But but that will come clear in a minute. But I think it's important to note that I was at the previous meeting and I voted. Well, I mean, the vote is presumably on. No, it may be not on record. I can't remember. But we didn't have recorded votes. But anyway, I mean, I was at the previous meeting, so I have seen this before.
Indeed, I think our solicitor is going to give us an explanation which probably revolves around the fact that that entity, Somerset Western Taunton, no longer exists, and the new committee, planning committee, is for Somerset Council Planning West, which is what we are attending here today.
Okay, that's useful clarification. I would hate my past to come back to haunt me, as wouldn't we all?
But that's exactly right, Chair, because there's been the new authority, the old authority's gone, the old committee's gone. This is an entirely new committee. The fact that you heard one of the applications that's on the agenda today previously does not mean that you cannot sit in judgment on that now. I won't go into the reasons why the applications come back. That can be explained in presentation. So to answer the question, no, Chair, you're fine to remain.
So you're happy that I'm not procedurally fettered then?
On the assumption that you will, as you have always done, approach this application just the same as every other one I've watched you sit on in the last 20 odd years, with an open mind, Will. Rosemary.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. The land of east of Porlock Road, Minehead, is next door to the cemetery, and I have several members of the family in there, but I tell you, I'm not predetermined.
Okay, thank you for all that information. Sorry, Sarah, I've lost track of myself. Did you put your hand? No, you've done that. Okay, just double check. Are there any other declarations from anybody? Right, I'm not seeing any other declarations. Okay, item 4 on our agenda, public question time, Martin.
We have none, Chair.
Okay, in that case, we're going to go straight into item 5 on our agenda, which is 38 of 822 of Blake 0344, Weir Lodge, 83 Stable Grove Road, Taunton, and the planning officer is Gareth Clifford. Gareth, good afternoon to you and welcome. Are you proposing to run the two applications together? Yeah, okay, so it's 5 and 6. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is planning application and listed building application for a single dwelling on land to the north of Weir Lodge, Stable Grove Road. So Weir Lodge there, where the red marker is, with Weirfield Green to the north and the garden area to the south. Previously, there's been permission for a pair of semis in the land at the bottom of the garden, and also in 2010 for the conversion of the main house back to a dwelling and 2 separate dwellings in the outbuildings to the east. And as part of that approval, the building you see there to the north was proposed to be removed. So that's the proposal currently before us, with a single dwelling set into the boundary wall to the north, parking space of Weirfield Green, following the demolition of the outbuilding. That's the single-storey concrete building that's there at the moment, that's proposed for demolition, and effectively already has, as I said, consent for demolition under the previous permission on the site. So that's a couple of views showing it in relation to the listed building, and also to the buildings across the other side of Weirfield Green, which are also listed. So that's the proposal, with the shaded area in grey, effectively the footprint of the existing building to be demolished. And as you can see from that, there's a a 2-storey dwelling set into the boundary wall, right on the corner with Stable Grove Road there and Weirfield Green.
Gareth, can I ask you to pause a minute? Well, the councillor's asking me something. Bear with me just a moment.
Gareth, I do beg your pardon for interrupting. Can we remove that black block, please, from the presentation? Thank you very much. Sorry, Chair.
My apologies, Gareth.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
right, okay.
Did you say the building had not been demolished? Because I thought it was down for demolition.
It hasn't been.
It hasn't been demolished? It's still there. Thank you.
We got a mic on.
There are details in terms of the floor layout of the dwelling. So 3-bedroom property, garden to the west, with a single parking space off Weirfield Green. Again, elevations of that proposed dwelling. So bottom one effectively is the west elevation facing into the proposed garden. And that blank elevation is the one facing towards the existing house. Again, the top elevation shown in section effectively is the one facing out onto Weirfield Green, so to the north, and then that's the side elevation. So in cross section, that effectively shows the increase in floor level height above existing ground level as the site's within a flood risk zone. So 0.62 above the existing floor level. And that effectively there is an elevation showing the view from Weirfield Green effectively to the corner point, with the access door set in with steps raised to take it out of the flood risk zone. The alterations to the wall to create a parking space, and obviously the blank windows to prevent overlooking of the listed building across the road. There, another view of the proposal in terms of how it relates to the boundaries and the listed building. And again, an aerial shot which shows the proposed garden and obviously the proposed gardens for the outbuildings to the listed building. So that's the existing view, the current access to Weir Lodge, and that's the view looking from that access up Staple Grove Road along the existing boundary line. So that's within the site, looking at the corner of Staple Grove Road and Weirfield Green, and you can see to the the left-hand side there is the building that's to be demolished. Again, that's the view looking at the corner of Weirfield Green from across the road on Staple Grove Road. Looking at the site where the dwelling will go from the opposite side of Weirfield Green. And there, slightly further back, so you can see there the roof of the building to be demolished. Then further along Weirfield Green, looking back towards the access point with the Staple Grove Road, to the listed building in the background, and the proposed dwelling would effectively be on that corner. Again, a couple of shots of the corner of Staple Grove Road and Weirfield Green. And again, so you can see the existing building that would come down as a result. On the update sheet, you'll see that there's been an update in relation to the current phosphate situation, in relation to the availability of P credits. I've also had one neighbour letter in relation to planning application reiterating their support for the proposal. Proposal in relation to the setting of the heritage assets, and that's obviously the existing listed building at Weir Lodge and the properties that are listed on the other side of the road, is considered detrimental to the setting of those buildings and also to the conservation area. would be considered contrary to policies CP8 and DM1. The site lies in a flood zone and we should be directing houses to areas of less flood risk. And as advised, the phosphates team are not currently able to offer a phosphate solution in terms of P credits for this site. In light of the impacts of the proposal, particularly in relation to the setting of the listed building and conservation area, the proposal is recommended for refusal in terms of both the planning application as previously and also the listed building application.
Gareth, are you content you've covered both aspects of the listed building application as well? Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll go to the public speakers. The first speaker on my list is Richard Moore, please. Mr. Moore, would you come to the front desk? If you push the right-hand button, sir, the red light will come on, and when you start speaking, your 3 minutes start then. Okay.
I'll be quick, so I want to use my 3 minutes usefully, but I am a bit mystified about the name of the council being a reason for bringing this back. Does it mean that all previous planning applications are coming back? It's very strange. Anyway, I'm Richard Moore. I restored the Summer House, which is a Grade 2 star listed building in White Willow Gardens. The restoration was commended by the William Stansdale Building Awards in 2015. If you don't know it, White Willow Gardens is a modern estate of 2- and 3-story townhouses sited directly in and around 9 listed buildings. The entrance to the estate is directly opposite 83 Staple Grove Road and the site in question. As such, I'm a neighbour of Mr. Amos and have long admired his liberal attitude and the way that he has sympathetically restored his principal residence and managed to produce 5 affordable housing units on his land, creating not only housing for single-parent families, but a real growing sense of community. People like him are few and far between, and he should be supported and not penalised for his efforts. I fully support the scheme and believe that the planned building will be a massive improvement to the area and the general community. There is no way it will be visually out of place or scale against the towering 3-story townhouses opposite. It was therefore with great interest that I attended the last meeting here when the planning decision was delegated to committee. I witnessed the planning officer's presentation, a healthy debate, and a democratic vote in favour of granting planning permission. I cannot believe that democratically elected councillors would even consider overturning a democratic vote in favour of granting this planning permission. There can be no possible justification for this, and I can only hope that you're here to bring the listed building planning permission in line with the approved delegated decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. The next individual on my list is Mr. Sheldon Venn, please. Mr. Venn, again, if you come up to the desk and push the right-hand button, the light will come on, and when you're ready, your 3 minutes start when you start speaking. So you can sit down. Please sit down.
Thank you. So I'm the applicant, and I'm reading a statement prepared by Rob Armstrong, who has worked in heritage consultancy since 2005. A heritage statement was prepared with respect to this application, and the general finding is yes, the proposed work will affect the immediate setting of the Grade 2 listed building, the character and appearance of the conservation areas. However, the effect is very localized. The proposed new dwelling is at the east of the site, allowing an uninterrupted view of the listed building from all angles and along Staple Grove Road. The conclusion of the heritage statement say that the harm identified by the conservation officer is effectively mitigated. The conservation officer also noted the character and appearance of the conservation area has been affected. However, the design of the new dwelling is harmonious to the local build form with wholly appropriate material palette utilized in the proposed finish. The conservation area also say that individual dwellings are the exception, with only a few on the corner of Stable Grove Road. Again, the heritage consultant do not dispute this observation. However, there are only very few detached dwelling in this area, and there is a mixed architectural character in this part of the conservation area. So really, this proposal is a dynamic addition to the range of style evident in the group of detached buildings already extant. So any perceived harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area is effectively mitigated by a combination of additional green space that is truly lacking at this site. So beyond heritage consideration, it is important to know a public benefit should be recognized with the addition of a new housing stock. And in conclusion, there has been no objection to this application, so I would recommend approving the scheme subject to phosphate resolution and any imposition of planning condition that was agreed in the March planning committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Van. The last public speaker on this is Mr. Gareth Pinwell, please. Mr. Pinwell? Sir. My apologies, ma'am. I don't have your name. I don't have your name. Well, please. But yes, of course, I wasn't aware. Okay. I'm
She's not registered, Chair. It's your discretion.
well, you're not registered, which is why I've missed you. I don't know why. Oh, okay. Well, please come. I'll use my discretion and allow you to speak. But my
Okay.
apologies. The reason I missed you is you're not on my list.
Oh, I did email
I'll
in, thank
find out
you.
why.
Okay,
Could
so
you
my name's Louise and I'm supporting the application because I'm a single parent living in one of the affordable housing which is owned by the landowner at 83 Staple Grove Road. Now, if it wasn't for these affordable housings, it's such a lovely house, I wouldn't be able to live there. So, you know, I just think it's a really good idea, and the application I'm supporting would give me a bigger garden for me and my 2 young children, and it would also give me a bit more privacy as well. That's it. Did I push the button?
Yes. Then my apologies. I need to take your full name. Done. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm sorry for the mix-up. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Mr. Pinwell, sir. Same applies. You have 3 minutes. So you can push the button on the right. The red light comes on, and your 3 minutes begin when you start speaking.
I'm Gareth Pinwell, a solicitor from Ashfords, representing the applicant and the landowner. I want to take you back to the last planning committee of the predecessor authority. The predecessor authority voted to approve the application on condition that phosphate mitigation was dealt with and planning conditions were agreed. That's where we are today. The day after that committee, the applicant wrote to the case officer asking how to progress those two matters to secure the consent, and submitted on the 25th of May, with the officer's advice, a Section 106 agreement to deal with phosphate credits. Following that, emails and phone calls were made and no progress was achieved in respect of the 106 agreement until the 12th of October, when I advised the client to lodge a signed 106 with the authority. This brought the authority into life, so we waited from May to October for a response. The day before committee, I received a response from the monitoring officer at this council and also from Ms. Blom Cooper. My other letter was 6 months old and it was responded to the day 2 days before committee. And I received a response from the monitoring officer the day before committee. We were advised that the P credits outlined and previously advised were not available on a day's notice. We then took our own solution, and I can report today that in a day we've been able to find a solution to deliver the 100 grams of phosphate mitigation that's required. And clearly we haven't had a chance to communicate that with your officers. But in that context, the case officer puts it back onto committee for reconsideration. We haven't had the benefit of dialogue with him to try and resolve this. It's just been put back on the committee. Now, look at this. What it is phosphate mitigation, which we didn't know our solution didn't work, and we've now got a new one. And there are a set of planning conditions for a single dwelling. Now, I've seen lots of planning consents and planning conditions, and one would expect a set of conditions for a single dwelling to be relatively easy to agree. But unfortunately, we've not been able to get there as yet. So what I'm actually saying to you is, we had a legitimate expectation that if we satisfied those two matters, we get a consent. We've tried to satisfy those two matters, and without a lack of engagement, we've not been able to do so. So what I say to you, why is this back before committee today? We've offered to try and resolve the two outstanding issues. We've now got a solution to phosphates, and I'm sure that we can actually agree a set of conditions. And in those circumstances, I suggest to you the appropriate course of action would be to defer consideration of these two items today. Let us talk to your officers, resolve the two outstanding issues, and hopefully the council can issue a consent in line with democratic wishes of the predecessors to this committee, who were the elected members. Thank you for listening to me. I'm more than happy to deal with any questions.
Thank you. We are not in a question and answer session here today, Mr. Pinmore, but thank you, sir, if you'd like to return your seat.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points from the public speakers. The officer report sets out the reasons why the planning application is back before you. You've not seen the listed building application before. It's not been to committee. So we're just talking about the planning application having come back. And the reason for that is set out in the officer report. Now, as I said earlier, because it's a new council, not just a change of name, it's a completely new authority, a new committee. This, in terms of the planning application, is effectively a rehearing of that application. Now, no decision has been issued on the planning application. You're not bound legally by the previous decision of the Somerset West Committee. You can come to the same decision as them, or a different decision, or as has been suggested, you are free to defer the application if there are good reasons for doing so. In terms of the reason it's come back, which is to do with phosphates, as members may know, where there is a need for a phosphate solution, there are a number of possible ways of dealing with it. And from what I understand is that the applicant put in a Section 106 agreement, a signed Section 106 agreement, on the basis that those phosphate credits would come from the local planning authority, because as members know, we have our own phosphate scheme. It's explained in the updating that because of the timing of the application, that's not currently possible. But having said that, members will know that there are other solutions to phosphates out there. One of which is the acquisition of phosphates from a private provider. So just so members are completely aware of that they're not completely reliant upon the local planning authority providing these P credits. There are other ways of dealing with it. Just on procedural matters, Chair, there's two applications being dealt with in the presentation and the speakers. When we get to that point, you will need two proposals and two votes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Excuse me, Gareth, was there anything you wanted to come back on before I open it up to the councillors?
No, I don't think so at this point.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just make one comment at this stage. We're very lucky we have a supplementary planning document for the Staple Grove Conservation Area, which applies to this, to that area. And as you are aware, a supplementary planning document is a material consideration for the planning authority. And in that, supplementary planning document, it says that the outbuilding, the building that's been talked about to be removed, it would be, I can't remember the exact phrase, somebody will tell me, I'm sure, but it is considered to be to the detriment of the setting of the listed building. So it would be welcomed if it was removed. I would suggest that this application is a way of removing that. I understand that historically it was due to be removed under a previous planning application, but that planning application was not taken forward. The previous owner of the house some years ago had planning permission, but that planning permission, which included demolition of that same building, was never acted upon and therefore lapsed. So we're looking at a new application. I'm being told I'm incorrect. My apologies. Gareth, please correct me.
Right, if I can just come in at that point. No, the previous application in 2010 was carried out. It's just that the building wasn't demolished as part of that planning application, but the conversion of the house and the outbuildings to dwellings was implemented.
I apologise if I've been incorrect on something. I was told something different to that. Okay, thank you. So that's where we are. It's now down to the councillors. First councillor Catchmire was Gwyl Wren. So we'll start with Gwyl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to address these opening remarks to this rather than the details of the application, because I must confess to being a little bit confused. From memory, this was passed subject or the delegated decision was passed down to officers 6 months ago to resolve two particular issues. One was the conditions and the other was the phosphate. Now, it would appear that neither of those have been resolved. I don't recollect that the original motion was in relation to any sort of time limit. So if they're still unresolved and presumably are resolvable, I'm not entirely sure why it's coming back round the track to us, because it's in exactly the same position it was when it was passed last time. So what I'm not sure what this committee process is necessarily going to add to it. And as I said to you before, I sat in on the previous committee and listened to the arguments and the building going down and one thing and another. So I'm just struggling to find out what we add to the process today.
I'll ask Evans, ask Mr. Martin.
I think Councillor Ronan, you put your finger on it in what you just said, in that there was no time limit to that delegation. So in the absence of a phosphate solution, and the delegation was on the basis that it's for the applicant to provide a phosphate solution, and we're not, as you've heard, we're not there yet. So I think that is the reason it's come back, in that we're not there yet, and we're now X months down the line. So, as I said earlier, if this committee feels the same as the previous committee, then you're entirely at liberty to continue along that route in terms of giving delegated authority to officers to work with the applicant to get a phosphate solution. As I say, we're not reliant completely on local planning authority P credits. There are other solutions, and to impose suitable conditions.
Can I come back, please? Okay. If, as I surmise, we're at the same place as we were at the termination of the previous meeting, and if, and I'm not sure whether I can say this or not, but if this committee were to take a contrary view to its predecessor, then I suspect there would be a very large can of worms opening up before a lot of people. I therefore think, under the circumstances, that we should be deferring this, probably for 3 months until the new year, to allow these issues to be resolved, if possible, And I'd like to put forward that as a proposal now, if I may.
Okay, can I just pause you there, because I want to take the solicitor's advice as to where we are, were we to adopt that as a suggestion. So, Martin.
If you were to adopt that as a suggestion, and on the basis that the committee is effectively ratifying is the wrong word possibly, but agreeing with the previous resolution, in that delegated authority be given to officers to work with the applicant to resolve the phosphate solution and impose conditions, then yes, deferral on that basis is entirely within your gift. Yeah.
Sorry, just a question
Yeah.
from me first. Would it be reasonable, in your view as the solicitor for this committee, that we put a time limit, and the suggestion was January? I would suggest personally the end of January, because we've got the December holiday break, and I want to give people sufficient time to actually complete the negotiations, rather than say, because we're taking a fortnight out at Christmas, you've effectively lost a fortnight.
Well, I heard, Chair, and the members would have heard that the solicitor for the applicant indicated that they had found an alternative solution.
Yeah.
So 3 to 4 months would seem sufficient to my mind, from my knowledge of dealing with Section 106 agreements. Just to go back on my previous comment about deferral, if the application is deferred from this committee, the previous resolution is still there of the committee, of the Somerset West Committee. So officers would still be, if that's the committee's wish, still be working on that basis to approve the application, subject to those 2 matters that the committee previously indicated.
So that's,
Will first, then Dawn, and then Stephen.
Sorry,
Okay, I will get to all of you. Please
sorry, I
continue
do
your
need
thought.
to follow this thread through, because at the last meeting I supported the officers, so therefore I essentially opposed this. Now I was expecting to come today with an open mind to see what had changed. Therefore, under the circumstances, I'm slightly, without any sort of debate, nervous about endorsing the previous committee's view. So therefore, I will withdraw my personal proposal to defer, if I may.
Of course you may. Yeah, it wasn't seconded, so at the moment, you can do that. So we're back in open debate, ladies and gentlemen. The next people on my list was Dawn, followed by Stephen, and then anybody else thereafter, Sarah after that. So. Dawn.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's me, but I'm still a bit confused why we're back with this one. Does this mean there are other planning applications that were decided by the previous SWT administration that could be coming back to us because they haven't done their phosphate solutions?
Maybe across the
As chair, I'm not aware of any. Alison? It's okay.
So my understanding is that there are occasionally applications that are coming back where they've been held in abeyance awaiting a phosphate solution when they were previously committee decisions. And we need to review them in the light of the current policy and practice. So we have brought back, and you will have seen Harrison Moore here, bringing those applications back. I can't tell you the exact number.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, please.
So I'm still trying to get my head around it, and forgive my ignorance here, but a decision is made on the proviso that a phosphate solution is going to be found, and they're having to come back because that phosphate situation has changed?
Again, I can be corrected by members, by officers that know better than I. My understanding is that the applicant suggested that they would join the Somerset Western Total, now Somerset Council Phosphate Solution Programme, but that unfortunately that programme is now oversubscribed and there is no possibility of them joining that. So they have to go to the marketplace to find an alternative acceptable phosphate solution, which we understand from the solicitor, Mr. Pinwell, that a solution has been found. Now, whether it's an approvable solution or not, I do not know. I'm assuming for the sake of this discussion it is, but it would have to go through the normal checks and balances with the officers to make sure that the solution being proposed is an acceptable phosphate solution for this application. Would that be about right?
Yeah, and the natural influence as a part of that process, we don't find them, but it's a sufficient mitigation for the project. We have to do that on all applications. It's not where there is a phosphate solution.
So just for me to be absolutely clear, then why is it back at committee to resolve the phosphate situation?
Because my understanding is because the Somerset Council in-house phosphate credit system cannot accommodate this application. So it needs to find an alternative solution which is acceptable to not just Somerset Council, but also Natural England. Okay? Yes, yes, but the issue is the applicant has suggested that they wish to join the Somerset Council phosphate credit solution, and that is not available because all the potential credits have been spoken for all the other applications that are in the same boat that are ready to go as soon as they get an agreed phosphate solution. The issue, as I understand it, is we don't have an agreed phosphate solution. I'm told by Mr. Pinwell, who I'm sure is entirely accurate, that there is a solution, and that has been suggested by, and I know not the company, so I'm going to call them Blogs and Company simply because I don't know who it is, but I'm assuming that Blogs and Company's phosphate solution is acceptable to A, this planning authority, and B, Natural England. Otherwise, there's not much point. Yeah, sorry, Dawn.
Sorry, I'm really pushing this because I'm still struggling. When this was agreed at SWT, subject to a phosphate solution, was it determined at that point that the phosphate solution needed to be a P credit or that it had to be obtained in any particular way? If it wasn't determined it had to be in any particular way resolved, I still don't understand why this needed another planning application committee meeting.
Yes, 2 points. I go back to my answer to Councillor Wren in that delegation was given to officers to grant permission if there was a phosphate solution. I mean, the resolution didn't specify what that phosphate solution would be or was, and we could not have done it, could not have resolved that. But given that there was no time limit as to when that delegation would run to, and given the fact that, as you've heard, up until we heard from Mr. Pinwell, the applicant's not come forward with a phosphate solution that works, then it was appropriate, officers felt, to bring the matter back to committee. That's why the planning application is here. And Alison has also mentioned to me that the listed building application has not been determined by this committee or any previous committee. So regardless of the reasons why the planning application is back and how you feel about that, there does need to be consideration of the listed building consent application, because that has not been considered by any committee.
It has to come to the council because the wife of the applicant is a councillor. You didn't say that, but I think you meant it.
Yes, the reason it came to committee in the first place is for transparency, because the wife of the landowner is a councillor and indeed sits on this planning committee, or does other than applications appertaining to her family, for obvious reasons. So that's why. I just want to make the point that whatever happens with item 5 on our agenda, which is the planning permission for this house, and whatever conditions we might place on that, then we will then have to have a conversation about the listed building consent. The presentation was both at once because it makes sense to run them together. Now I've got a list, and both Stephen and Sarah haven't spoken yet. Rosemary, I will come to you thereafter. So it's Stephen, Sarah, and then Rosemary, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in the happy position of not having been on the committee in March, so a lot of this is now coming fresh to my ears. I have to say that it does strike me that the whole consideration of this item today is premature. You reached a decision in March, which I take it was contrary to officer advice, but I'm assuming that the reasons for refusal, which are on page 32, were the ones that you also had before you then. You clearly thought that for whatever good reasons, it was approvable, subject to conditions, and officers were delegated to go and have the discussions about the phosphate solution. There wasn't a time limit set on that, as I understand it. So it strikes me that that bit of discussion still has some way to go, and therefore trying to bring it back to redetermine it today, in my view, isn't appropriate. We should be allowing the process to continue, and at such point as it is either impossible to reach that phosphate solution, or clearly you have reached that solution, then we can hear what the outcome is. But at this moment, I have to say, I feel that the previous decision is one that is still in the course of operation, and we should let that one run its course. It has yet to do so, in my view.
Okay, just for clarity, I'm going to bring the solicitor back in because I think that's correct, but I'm going to make sure the solicitor leads us in the appropriate direction, as ever.
Well, it's a matter for members, but my understanding from what was said is that you're minded to defer this application from this committee so that the discussion about a phosphate solution is resolved. The question then is that what then happens to the application? Does it then come back to this committee for the final resolution, or delegated, as was previously done by the previous committee?
We reached the conclusion that it should be delegated to officers, then it's delegated to officers, just to be consistent with the decision that you've already taken. But clearly, from what we've been hearing today, we have not yet reached the point where that can be finalised, one way or the other.
Irrespective of that, the second application 6 on our agenda today is the listed building consent, which we will need to make some comments on and take a view at some point when we reach item 6 on our agenda. We're still on item 5 at the moment, but yes, I take your point, and yes, and I'm reasonably sure that were this committee to defer it for a period of time to be agreed, that would then encourage the applicant to come forward with meaningful discussion, encourage the officers to resolve the situation, and hopefully everybody would walk away from the table happy, having achieved what they needed to achieve, i.e. the phosphate solution, etc. I don't know if you've got any comments on that, Martin? No. Okay. Stephen.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, to come back, but if that is the view that we finally take, it might be better to postpone hearing then the listed building application until such time as this application has been sorted.
Take some more advice.
Yes, Chair, and this comes back to my previous question about the planning application. If the committee defers from this meeting for officers and the applicant to resolve the phosphate issue, and it's resolved, what then happens? Are officers delegated to then grant the planning permission, or should the application then come back to this committee final resolution, particularly if the listed building application is also deferred from this meeting. And I agree with you, councillor, that if the planning application is deferred, it makes sense to me, again, it's a matter for members, that the listed building application is also deferred, so that the two are resolved at the same time. But that is on the basis that they come back, you know, the listed building consent application would have to come back to this committee at some point.
Okay. Stephen, does that cover all the points you wanted to raise at this point?
I think so.
Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll move to Sarah, followed by Rosemary, followed by Habib, please. So Sarah.
Yes, I think some of the things I was going to say are not relevant if we're going to move down that way, but I actually personally think we should deal with the listed building one today, because then the officers could determine the first one and we could get the whole thing sorted without coming back to committee. So if we determine the listed building one today and give the officers the authority to sort out the application with the phosphate solution and section 106 if necessary, that would be the best way of doing it, so it doesn't have to keep coming back to committee. That's my third point. My second point is the existing building at the rear of the property, which hasn't been demolished, presumably wouldn't get permission to be built behind a listed building now. That's my question to Mr. Clifford. My second question is, could that building as it is now be converted under Class Q to a residential dwelling without permission? In which case, you know, you've got a residential user right at the back of that property anyway. And in the light of the answers to those questions, I think what they're proposing looks much better than the building that's there now and enhances the buildings, because if you look at it, Weir Lodge itself has clearly been added to on a number of occasions, because there's different types of brickwork, there's different types of treatment of the exterior. So, you know, it's not all of a piece, one fantastic listed building that looks fantastic. You know, it's got a lot of changes to it. So my view is that, I mean, I accept the officer's recommendation that it's in a list, it's close to a listed building, but so are the other things that have been built there. And it's really the front of Weir Lodge with the garden at the front that is the bit that looks old and looks in keeping. The back of it doesn't now because it's got a great big shed out there anyway.
Okay, Gareth, did you want to come back?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. The answer to those questions are no. My view is it wouldn't get permission if it was applied for today. No, it wouldn't classify under Class Q for conversion. And my understanding also is that it's structurally it's not particularly sound. And you know, your conservation officer advice is quite clear that the proposed new dwelling is more detrimental to the area and the setting than the current building that they're proposing to demolish it.
Okay, so Rosemary and then Habib.
Yeah, one of my questions was going to be, this building that's existing, would we still expect it to be demolished if we didn't agree this application? And have we got any power to do that?
So she's just waiting to turn it off. It's so difficult, isn't it? Turn itself off.
Thank you. My understanding, and Mr. Clifford will correct me if I'm wrong, is that the building, the outbuilding in question, has permission for demolition, so it could be demolished, but there is no requirement that it be demolished.
Yes, it's beyond the enforcement period in which we could insist on it being demolished.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, Rosemary, was there something else you wanted to say?
Not really, because I was thinking if it could be demolished, the whole thing would look rather nice and there wouldn't be a building right on the corner like there is going to be.
It won't be unless it gets permission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points here. This is going to be an affordable house, as I take it, yeah. But what are the waiting lists for our affordable housing in this area? So that, you know, I take it they're much needed units in this area. So if I can have some clarification on that, I'd be grateful. And I'm like the rest of the committee members, I'm perplexed that, you know, this has come back and it's just opening, you know, the can of worms that that allows every application to sort of, you know, come back after, you know, being accepted or refused or whatever. And, you know, where are we going to end up with this? So if I may suggest that the application be deferred till actually February to give our officers and the applicants enough time to resolve the outstanding issues such as phosphate, the impact on the character of, you know, the area and the setting of the listed building. But on the proviso that our officers actually engage in a proactive way of having a proper dialogue with the applicants, I think that would give us some way going forward, in my view. At this stage, I just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. We won't look for a seconder just yet. I'm just making sure I haven't missed anybody that wants to comment at this stage. I'm not seeing any other hands up. So Martin, I'll bring you in at this point.
Thank you, Chair. So there's been a proposal to defer the planning application. Again, we just need to understand the basis on which we're deferring and then what happens. If, Councillor, you're proposing that it's deferred effectively on the same basis as the previous Somerset West Committee decision, that it's delegated to officers to discuss with the applicant a phosphate solution and the imposition of planning conditions. The question then is, are officers delegated to then grant the planning permission, or should the application then come back to committee? So that is the question, Councillor, in the proposition.
If I may, absolutely, to come back with granting application in line with previous decision.
Sorry, so just to be clear, the planning application, subject to the matters, the two matters, phosphates and conditions, should then be reported back to this committee latest by February for final sign-off. Is that correct, Chair? Is that?
Sorry.
That's your proposal, Andrew.
Sorry. No, the way I understand it is that the delegated decision will be given to the officers to grant the permission. Yeah.
Like Dawn, I'm confused now. I thought the proposal by Stephen was quite simple. A previous decision had been taken by a planning committee, right? The matters had not been resolved. He was proposing to defer what we're talking about here today in this application, whilst that planning application, previous one, is resolved. So when hearing Martin talk as our solicitor and Habib, was it a question of you were talking about this application or the previous one?
It's the same application, Chair. It's the planning application. And sorry, I'm pressing this point just to be absolutely clear that if the planning application is deferred from this meeting, that officers, and this is your proposal, so correct me if it's wrong, officers would have delegated power to actually issue the planning permission subject to the resolution of the phosphate issue and the imposition of planning conditions. That's and Councillor Farber is indicating that's his proposal. In terms of the listed building consent application, obviously that still needs to be resolved. So, Chair, would that listed building consent application then come back to committee? And it would need to come back to committee because of the reasons that, sorry, Councillor Wakefield indicated earlier, because of the involvement of the landowner. That could be determined once the planning application had been issued.
What would be the situation, Martin, if we reached a decision on item 6 on our agenda today?
Well, Chair, if you are the committee on item 5 is giving delegated authority to the officers to issue the planning permission, and therefore are saying that that permission should be granted on the terms of the previous committee's decision, then you could then proceed to deal with item 6 now, rather than defer. But again, it's a matter of what the proposal actually is. And I understood from Councillor Farberhide that he was effectively reiterating the decision of the Somerset West Committee that officers should go away to deal with those two matters.
Sam?
Yes, I mean, there is a bit of an awkwardness here, isn't there? And I know that Mr. Evans is struggling through it, just as the rest of us are, which is that one of the reasons, Dan, for refusal of the application today is alien design, contrary to policy CP8, DM1D. So basically the conservation area, the heritage issues, basically. That's the principal reason for refusal on the list of building consent. If we today say, yes, definitely go away and officers are delegated effectively to resolve the application, that therefore implies that they could approve it, having taken into account the first reason for refusal, which is also then the reason for refusal on the list of building consent. So that therefore implies that the list of building consent will be passed as well. That's where we're in a really awkward situation. So in a way, I was kicking the can down the road for 3 months so that we can talk about it a bit more and just maybe give the officers the opportunity to be able to bring us all to a sensible conclusion, rather than trying to back ourselves into a corner today that might not be legally sustainable. I think that's where I am, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Chair, because all I was going to say was these are the same reasons for refusal as they were at the last committee, and they were determined. So I have no problem with seconding.
Can I just check the situation with our legal advisor, that if we are in a situation where we are suggesting that there is a time period to ensure that people speak to each other and come to a resolution one way or the other, and the suggestion is that it's no later than the February Planning Committee meeting, and obviously prior to that would be beneficial for everybody. If that is the case, then permission is delegated to the officers to grant that, assuming the phosphate issue and the conditions are met, then we are still technically left with a listed building permission, which is not yet resolved. Now, one suggestion is that by staying with the original previous authority's decision would lead us to believe that the listed building application would also be approved if phosphates and conditions were deemed acceptable. But I'm not sure where that actually leaves us with granting permission. I'm just not sure.
Okay, I'll have a go. So we have a proposal to defer, and that's been seconded on the basis that officers have delegated power to grant the planning permission, subject to the two issues that we've been debating. So let's say Mr. Pinwell, I'm sure, is right that there is a phosphate solution that we can work on to resolve that, and planning permission is issued. Then, as has been indicated, part of the reasons for refusal and the issues around the planning application are the impacts upon the listed building. And therefore, you know, in terms of your listed building consent application, either you could continue to resolve that today and consider that today, if you've already given delegated authority to the officers to resolve, or you could defer to a later date once planning permission has been granted, or you could go with the officer recommend. Well, you couldn't go with the officer recommendation. Those things. So those are your two choices, I think.
My apologies, I didn't make things clear enough last time. Permission has already been given. I am not going to say at this stage whether I agree or disagree with that decision taken. The point is, I agree that a decision has been taken. Terms were set down, and therefore we are saying we'll put this lot on hold to allow that to run its course properly, and we will put a time limit on it because it didn't have a time limit on it previously. So we are, if you like, kicking both these, as Stephen so kindly put it, into the long grass to allow that to be resolved. We're not changing what has already happened.
Well,
I wasn't going to speak again. Right, where we are is that, as Norman has quite carefully articulated, and I think we now all understand, is that there was a planning permission was granted in March of this year, subject to further negotiations in relation to the conditions attached to it and the phosphates. I think we're all here on that, and I think we're all pretty much of the view that we're still at that position today. So actually determining it at this point is pointless. So we will defer it. However, last March, we did not discuss listed building consent. Now, why the two didn't come together, I don't know, but they didn't. However, they are entwined. You cannot, in my view, allow one to go forward with the other. So, for example, if we were in 5 minutes' time to determine and approve the listed building consent, then you have effectively obviated any negotiations that the officers will have in relation to the planning application, because it will, well, I think you will, because I think it'll be very, very difficult because the design will be the design will be the design. Now, it was fairly clear from the public speaking that there were substantial differences, shall we say, between the conditions that the council would like to impose on this particular building and the ones that the applicant would find acceptable. So I think if I mean perhaps Mr. Clifford can help here, but it occurs to me that if we do one without the other, then we're only creating problems. So if you're going to defer, then the two must be deferred and they must be resolved together. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think there is going to be an issue in coming to an agreement in relation to appropriate conditions to impose on a permission should members decide to take that approach. Whether it's listed building or either, yeah. The issue is, do members think that there's an adverse impact in terms of the setting and of the listed building from the proposed dwelling in that location as shown in the presentation or not?
And presumably members in March didn't think that because
it was determined.
Yeah. So I think, Mr. Chairman, we're all going around the houses to say that it's premature for us to discuss anything much more today. Officers need to go away and clearly have some more discussion about this. If it is appropriate for it to be brought back to this committee, so be it, but it may well be that it's resolved. And I think for us to carry on whittering on about it at the moment, frankly, is counterproductive.
Thank you for the clarity, Stephen, that you often bring to our committee meetings, and I thank you for that. I'm going to suggest, I'm going to ask Martin Evans, our solicitor, to come up with an appropriate form of words for where we are, to make sure everyone is happy with that. And I'm going to also suggest, as has been suggested, that we put a time limit on this of the February planning committee meeting, and hope that everybody can get together and agree the terms and conditions before the February meeting. I would hope that they would be able to do it in fairly short order. Mr. Pinwell indicated that they had a ready solution which should prove acceptable on the phosphates issue. I'm hoping that that would be possible. That's what I hope. Do you want to say something, Martin?
Chairman, just going back to what I think is now being proposed is that the planning application be deferred from this meeting. Officers work with the applicant to resolve the phosphate issue and the planning conditions. If those are resolved, planning permission be granted.
Yeah.
And in terms of the listed building consent application, that too is deferred. Sorry, just to go back, with a deadline of the February meeting latest. In terms of the listed building consent application, that too is deferred, but that would need to come back to this committee at some point because of the relation. If there's no debate or decision on that and it's just deferred, it would need to come back because of the, as you indicated earlier, Councillor Wakefield.
Councillor Wakefield, then Stephen, then Andrew.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. I wasn't on the planning committee when this was discussed before, and I still haven't got it absolutely clear in my head. The listed building application, has that not been before committee before? And if it hasn't, if I was the applicant, I'd be bloody annoyed if I spend 3 or 4 months trying to sort out conditions and things, then come back to commission and we say, oh, we can't give you listed building consent. We've got to decide today a resolution to grant that, or otherwise the whole thing falls, because you can't have one without the other. You can't have planning permission without listed building consent. So if that hasn't been before the committee before, we need to make a resolution to grant or to turn it down. We need to do something today.
It has not come to the planning committee previously. Stephen.
Did I misunderstand though, Mr. Clifford, to say that he felt that there would be the opportunity to be able to work through the issues so that it would be possible to come forward with a list of building consent that could possibly be approved? And that is, no? Did I misunderstand that? So you're saying that there is no possibility of it ever being able to get listed building consent?
Well, that's for members to determine. My opinion was given in relation to a list of conditions that you might want to impose if you grant listed building consent.
Can I just ask a question of clarification? That I mean, the previous application way back that gave permission to demolish this building, obviously that application was enforced, but they didn't knock the building down. But the permission is still in place. Does that mean they can just knock it down? So why are we arguing about whether they can knock it down or not when they could just go and knock it down?
No, we're arguing about the lack of a phosphate solution for the new build house, right? And listed building consent has not been granted, and listed building consent has not come before a planning committee. Stephen.
So, with all due respect, and I hear exactly what Councillor Wakefield says, but I think that we need to move now to defer both on the points that Mr. Evans has put forward, and then we have the opportunity to re-examine the situation in February with regard to the listed building consent, which by that point there might have been other discussions around that.
Just to say, if the planning application is deferred and things go as planned and planning permission is issued, the listed building consent application would still need to come back for resolution. But by that point, the local planning authority would have made a decision on the planning application saying there was no harm to the listed building. So it would be, at that point, it would be a fait accompli, I'd suggest. Yeah, but.
So. Dawn, you wanted to come back?
I'm confused again, easily done it seems, but I don't see why we can't debate the listed building now here and get that resolved as a separate, if it is a standalone planning application, why can't we deal with that as a standalone application decision today? And then we don't require this to come back again and waste, well, sorry, not waste is the wrong word, but spend a lot more time debating an application that's already been decided on, because we didn't decide today on the listed building element of the application.
Okay, right. In order to get this procedurally correct, we need to, at this stage, vote on agenda item 5, okay? And whatever the decision on that is, if it is, for example, the suggestion that we've had, which has been seconded, which is that it's deferred so conversations can happen between the officers and the applicant regarding phosphates and planning conditions, and that we put a timescale on that to the latest is the February Planning Committee meeting, February 24 Planning Committee meeting. We decide that, we can then look at agenda item 6, which is the listed building consent. Okay, so I'm going to start now with asking if there's anybody that wants to comment on any aspect of item 5, where we have a proposer and a seconder that it is deferred until the latest of February 24 Planning Committee meeting to enable officers to work with the applicant and the applicant to work with the officers to produce a acceptable phosphate solution and acceptable conditions for that build. Okay, Norman, was it something on this particular item?
Yes, the wording that our solicitor used, that we defer to consider the previous, so consideration can be given to the previous, just to, again, for clarity's sake, to make sure we're not talking about this one, but the one previously.
If it wasn't clear, I think it is clear that we are talking about the version that was previously granted subject to, but there hasn't been sufficient movement between the applicant and the officers, or the officers and the applicant, to resolve those issues, they being the phosphate issue and planning conditions. So we're on agenda item 5. Gareth, is there anything you wanted to add at this point?
No, thank you.
Councillor Wade.
Oh, Councillor Wade.
I just wanted to ask to make it clear that if by the February meeting, those issues haven't been resolved, and presumably officers have to use whatever efforts they can to make sure they speak to the applicant and all the rest of it. And it then falls away, and that would mean that the applicant would have to start all over again and make a plan if he wanted to come back, or a different one or something. But that it falls away. That I just wanted to check what happens to it if it doesn't get done.
In those circumstances, it would then, the planning application would then come back to this committee. And if it hadn't been sorted out, officers don't have any delegated powers to refuse the application on that basis. So it would still be an undetermined application, would have to come back. Chair, while I'm speaking, just to say the proposal, which has been seconded, is to defer on the basis of the previous committee's decision that delegated authority be given to officers to resolve with the applicant the phosphate issue and planning conditions, and then grant the permission if those two things are resolved.
And with a timescale to the February 24 Planning Committee meeting prior to that. Okay, that's been proposed and seconded. Can I see those in favour of that, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Right, so that's unanimous. Okay, agenda item 6. You can have a 2-minute comfort break before we get back. So let everybody think about what they're going to say about agenda item 6. I'll make it 4 minutes. Some of us are older than we used to be. And for reference purposes, that is 38/23/0103/LB. This is building consent works. I'm going to ask Gareth, you went through your presentation of the two together. Is there anything that you would like to bring to our attention or reiterate?
Only to say that your professional advice hasn't changed in terms of the adverse impact in terms of the setting of the list of buildings, which is why the recommendation is for refusal.
Okay. I'm going to suggest from the chair that we defer this item until at the latest the February meeting, in line with the previous resolution a moment or two ago. And encourage the applicant and the officers to work through the objections and the issues to come up with a resolution to this. Because I think de facto, if they come up with a resolution and they solve the issues for item 5, they will, by virtue of that, resolve the issues for the listed building consent. Stephen.
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak to this? Yep. Oh, right. Okay. Okay, Dawn.
I just wanted a point of clarification on listing buildings and how they're determined, and do they have to come back to a committee, or are they decidable by delegated powers outside the meeting? And what determines whether a listed building comes to committee?
It goes back to, I think, Councillor Wakefield's point earlier in terms of the, sorry, Councillor, in terms of the fact that the landowner in this case is part to an elected council. So because of probity issues, the application would need to come back to the committee rather than being dealt with under delegated under the constitution. Yes, so the proposal is to defer until the listed building consent application until latest the February meeting, Chair. Oh, it's been seconded.
Sarah.
I only disagree with that because what I said earlier, they could do all the work and then the committee in 3 months, 4 months time could say, oh no, we're not going to give it listed building consent after all. So unless we make a resolution to grant listed building consent subject to it being sorted out with conditions, then the thing hangs in the balance. Is that right? I mean, that it seems to me wrong to make them go away and do lots of work and come back and then say, oh, we didn't think about listed building consent last time. We're not going to give it. Well, that can't be right. You've got to either make a decision you are going to grant it or that you're not. And because they've got a resolution to grant under item 5, you've got to determine item 6 one way or the other.
Well, Chair, the proposal that's been seconded is to defer. Obviously, councillors can agree with that or not. Just to follow the logic through, if the planning application can be resolved and planning permission is then granted under delegated power, and then the listed building consent application comes back to this committee, there would then have been a decision by the local planning authority in terms that the proposal is not harmful to the listed building. So, you know, in that circumstance, and given that history, I think it would fait accompli I mentioned earlier. I think if that's how it works out.
Okay, we're at a position where on agenda item 6, we have a proposed and seconded motion that we defer this to the latest, the February. Rosemary.
All I can see here, and this is far too practical, I'm sure, that if the planning permission goes through, we end up, and they haven't demolished the building, that we end up that without that building being demolished, we end up with a load of rubbish on the corner if we don't go through with the planning permission. Sorry, that's not exactly what I said, but
You can't put a. you
we
can't-
do
you
end up with a
can't- you
load of
can't-
rubbish that's there.
You
on the
can't,
corner.
yeah, you can't put a building on that corner. You can't activate the planning permission were it to be agreed and granted, because you would need to remove the eyesore building beforehand, otherwise there isn't the space to put the new building. Yeah, so as Mr. Evans has pointed out, assuming for the moment that our officers and the applicant can agree the phosphates issue and the planning conditions, there would then be no reason not to grant the listed building permission. Dawn, you wanted to come back?
I was just going to say that actually it's probably not a phosphate issue, although that's got to be, it's the planning conditions on the first application, which would then make it acceptable for the listed buildings. So once they're negotiated, it's probably.
The conditions are to some degree are not relevant. What members need to determine is whether the proposal is acceptable or not. If it's acceptable, then I'm sure we can come up with conditions which are going to address the necessary controls in terms of materials. But you know, it's a fundamental issue in terms of whether there should be a dwelling there or not. That is the issue, not what necessarily what the materials are. And therefore, members need to make a decision one way or the other, whether that is acceptable in listed building terms or not.
That's what you're saying.
Well, the proposal is to, your proposal, which is seconded by Councillor Pugsley, is to defer the application until the latest, the February meeting, given the previous resolution to reiterate the delegated authority to officers. Which is a substantive motion that's on the table.
Okay.
Chairman.
Okay. Dawn.
Martin, can you explain to me, because I'm not seeing the link, if the deferral decision has sorted out the phosphate and the planning conditions, I'm not seeing the link between why that then creates a favourable situation for the listed building determination.
Chair, because part of the recommended reasons for refusal on the planning application related to the impact on the listed building. Yeah. Yes. So the previous decision by the Somerset West Planning Committee was against the officer recommendation, which was saying that there was going to be harm caused to the listed building. Members did not agree with that. So the resolution that's been taken on item 5, which has been made, is to effectively refresh that delegation to officers to grant that planning permission. Now, if that happens and the phosphates and conditions are resolved, when the listed building consent application comes back to committee and the permission has already been granted, then that is a significant consideration for the determination of the listed building consent application, I'd suggest.
Can I just check, there isn't a separate procedure for a listed building application that is completely autonomous from that process?
It's a listed building consent application is a separate application. Separate considerations do apply to them. But the issues, as Mr. Clifford has explained, the essential point is, does the proposal cause harm to the listed building? And your previous resolution to grant delegated authority to grant the planning permission, to me, suggests that, you know, you're comfortable with that previous decision by the Somerset West Committee.
Sorry, I've got one final thing. On that basis, I'm really confused why this is two separate planning applications.
One's a planning application, one's a listed building consent application.
They are
They're
separate.
different animals.
So I think what you're saying is, you have said, Mr. Evans, that it would be a fait accompli in a way to decide the listed building consent differently, but it would also be unconscionable to decide something different from what you've decided on the main planning application. And if you look at on page 30, the planning balance and conclusion to item 5, it says the proposed dwelling is considered to be detrimental to the setting of the heritage assets. And if you've decided that's not the case, you can't then say on the listed building. I do get that now. I didn't quite see how they fitted together. I do, and I'm content. Thank you.
Technically, they could, but I think would be difficult. So I think a safer route today would be to defer it, to allow those conversations to take place and for those negotiations to take place across the piece. So we've got it's been proposed and seconded that we defer agenda item 6 to no later than the February 24 planning committee meeting, and hope that the officers and applicant can get together amicably and come to a sensible resolution for all, bearing in mind the constraints of the MPPF, etc., as they do in their normal daily work. That's been proposed and seconded. Can I see those in favour of that, please? That's all. That's 9 again. That's 9 again. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry that was a bit convoluted, but sometimes they are. Gareth, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Russell, we're going to come to yours now. Okay, agenda item 7. Russell, when you're ready, we're moving on to agenda item 7, which is 3/21/22/084, and this is for the erection of 10 dwellings, including access, drainage, infrastructure, and landscaping on land east of Porlock Road, Minehead. And I know that this was not your report, which you're presenting it for an officer who's no longer with the organisation. So thank you for doing that, and we will try not to make the questions too difficult for you. Okay, whenever you're ready, Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So members, as Chair's just noted, the application proposes full planning permission for the erection of 10 dwellings with access, drainage, infrastructure, landscaping, etc. On land east of Porlock Road in Minehead. The site itself is on the very western periphery of Minehead, and the application site is outlined in red on the location plan for you there. Just a general overview of where the site is in relation to Minehead itself. You'll note that just on the western side, within the red ring there, that's the application site broadly. It's very close to the contiguous built-up area. Just to the north of the site, you've got the local cemetery as well. And for context, a large portion of the land on the southern side of Hot Pot Road here within Minehead is part of the large local plan allocation, and there's been residential development in the general periphery locality of the site quite recently. Just a slightly closer up view of the site. It is this triangular parcel of land. Members will note that just on the aerial view there, there's a slight line that you can see, and that's an indication of the route public footpath that crosses the site, which has direct access off of Home Meadow here and through onto Porlock Road. So the proposal, as I said, is for 10 detached dwelling houses within the site, and the proposed site plan before you there, which has been amended during the application process following negotiations with the applicants. The changes broadly related to the plots in this northern area here, just to try and create a little bit more separation and a better relationship with, well, one another, but also Porlock Road itself. The access, as you can see, is fairly centrally located within the road frontage. The proposal is to have visibility displays that are 2.4 meters by 85 meters in both directions, and the access road and the state road within the site, whilst it may well remain in private ownership, it will be constructed to adoptable standards. You'll see here within the grey footpath and the red dotted line, the proposal does include the diversion of the public footpath which crosses through the site, just so that some of the dwellings can be appropriately located. The link into Home Meadow is in the very bottom corner here, and we'll see some photographs of that. The development itself, the high part of the site, so it is sloping land, and generally within the southwest corner and this kind of eastern corner where the footpath exits the field, that's the highest land, and then the land falls away to the north towards where the existing access off of Porlock Road is, and the drop in elevation is approximately 6.5 meters from the highest point down to the lowest point. As you'll see on the elevations that will follow, there's a range of building types and heights within the site. Some of the units are 1.5 stories with rooms within the roof, and the units within this northern parcel here, they would be 2-story dwellings. These elements around the southern and the eastern periphery of the site would be the 1.5-story units. Just a slightly more detailed plan of the access here, just to show that the intervisibility as one would come around the site. There was some concern at one point from highways regarding intervisibility as you enter the site from Porlock Road and those vehicles that would be exiting the site along the estate road. But as can be seen there within these hashed areas, forward visibility, if you were driving, you can see around the corner of the estate road appropriately. And vehicle tracking, again, this drawing demonstrates that refuge vehicles, emergency service vehicles, delivery vehicles and the like would be able to enter the site, maneuver, turn and exit as well. So plot 1 of the site, which is in the very southwest corner, is a 1.5-story dwelling, and the general theme in terms of the appearance of the properties is fairly consistent, although there are some changes in the architectural style of the individual dwellings across the site. The application itself is for a range of 7 3-bed dwellings and 3 4-bedroom dwellings. There are some useful images on the site. You can see that the dwellings will be finished in a combination of render facing brick, stone to the walls, a combination of slate and clay tiles to the roofs, and fairly modern approach to fenestration throughout. There are some similarities in some of the plot types, but generally there is a fairly good mix in terms of the actual design of the individual plots. The size of the dwelling houses are appropriate and they exceed the minimum space standards. Just take you through briefly again, just a different house type. You can see that some of the units utilize dormer windows and roof lights. Plot 7, for instance, is towards the northeastern corner of the site, but it's in quite close proximity to existing properties on Home Meadow, as is plot 8. And the use of reducing the building heights, having rooms within the roof with roof lights, will ensure that there's no undue overlooking, loss of privacy, or harm to amenity in general. And then just the final plan, just to take you through them in detail, just the different types of garages that would be located on the site. The application is supported by a fairly detailed landscaping plan. I won't go through it in too much detail, but suffice to say that the general ethos of the proposal is to retain as much of the existing hedgerow and tree planting to the site periphery as possible, and then for that to be reinforced with new planting within the site. And the general landscaping scheme has been supported by officers. The main impact in terms of existing hedgerow will be the formation of the access, which is unavoidable in effect, but there is considered to be appropriate mitigation being put forward with the proposals. Just take you through some site photographs. So this is stood outside the site access. You can just see it on the left-hand side there, looking up towards the up the highway. The existing field access, it is in use, and there's a pedestrian gateway there for the public right of way. Having walked it yesterday, it does appear to be fairly well used and a well trodden path. Just stood outside the existing access, looking in a southerly direction there up the highway. You'll note that we're currently within the 40-mile-an-hour limit zone here. Then you exit and go into the national highway. Speed limit 60 miles an hour. The proposals do include moving the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit further south to the point where Porlock Road junctions with the A Road, and there is a proposal for a traffic regulation order to bring that into place prior to the access to the site actually being undertaken. This is again just stood at the access, looking in the northerly direction along the highway down towards the cemetery. You can see a vehicle parked in the very distance there. That's actually on a little pull-in area to the front of the cemetery where visitors tend to park. And then looking into the site with the field access gate and the pedestrian access, you'll note that the land in the background does slope quite sharply to the north, or to the south, sorry, and does rise up quite significantly. Just inside the site, existing site access, that is, looking along the inside of the road frontage hedgerow there. The site itself is well overgrown, hasn't been particularly well maintained in recent years. And then just walking along the footpath, looking back towards the field access in the bottom corner. And then again, just looking out across the field, you can just see that there are undulations within the topography of the site. This is stood up in the very top corner of the site, looking back down towards Porlock Road and the bottom corner, which has the access here, as I'm indicating. The trees along the boundary line here give a good visual barrier between the application site and the cemetery to the other side of the site. And then just looking down the southern boundary of the site, and this is the pedestrian access through into the right of way that runs into the adjoining residential estate. So the key considerations for members today, just starting out with the principal development really. So the application site itself is located on the very edge of Minehead. Minehead is obviously the key settlement within the local plan for delivering housing growth across the plan period. And policy SC1 does support, as I think we've heard many times before, supports the principle of residential development on the edge of settlements, particularly Minehead, where there is within 50 metres of the contiguous built-up area of the site, and officers are content that that basic criteria has been met by the proposals. In terms of assessing the impact, if housing is to be delivered under SC1, then there are key considerations that need to be given due consideration. And the first criteria is making sure that a site is well related to local services. The site itself, as set out within the officer report, is approximately 1 mile from the town centre of Minehead, which is a fair distance, admittedly, but with the public footpath linking through into the adjoining residential estate and the presence of a bus stop within, I believe, 400 metres of the application site, which has an hourly service, as well as the opportunity to cycle and so on into town. Officers are content that the actual application site itself on the edge of the settlement is well enough related to local service provision to be able to address that criteria. The second criteria is making sure that local services and facilities, etc., can be accessed in a safe and reasonable manner by pedestrians. As we've seen on the site plan and from the photographs, there's an existing public right-of-way that crosses the site. That provides access for would-be residents of the proposed development through into Home Meadow onto established estate roads, which do have footpaths, are lit, and there is the opportunity to walk into and out of town to access services, facilities in a safe and convenient manner. Admittedly, 1 mile is a bit of a stroll, but some people aren't averse to that. And when considering the general distance and proximity of town services to the site, as I said, officers are content that the site is located in an appropriate position. One of the other factors, criteria, is to ensure that the development respects local context and the character and appearance of the area. As you would have seen from the detailed drawings, the site itself has been laid out in a form where the density itself is quite low. So whilst it may not make the best use of the land in terms of providing a slightly higher density development, what it does is ensure that as we move from the urban environment and what was the late 20th century estate to the eastern side of the site to the rural edge of Minehead, the density of the development is being reduced in an appropriate fashion. In terms of the house types and the design approach, officers are content that the general appearance of the properties, the palette of materials and the design of individual dwellings is satisfactory and will make a positive contribution towards the general built environment. The fourth criteria under policy SC1 is to require that development does not create significant traffic or unsuitable impacts upon local highway network. I think it's important to note that there's been no objection to the proposals from the Highway Authority, who are content that Porlock Road and the surrounding state roads and the A39 can accommodate what would be a relatively modest increase in vehicle movements associated to 10 dwellings. As we saw from some of the plans, the design of the access into the site is safe. We've got good pedestrian connectivity. There's opportunities to cycle and utilise bus routes as well. And so from a highway perspective, officers are content that there would not be a severe adverse impact upon highway safety. The final criteria under policy SC1 is to ensure that there's no harm to neighbouring amenity or the area in general. And as I explained when going through the slides, the properties to the eastern side of the application site, which do run adjacent to existing properties in Home Meadow, they are 1.5 story in height. They've been set well away from the boundary of the sites. There are no windows that would directly overlook properties, and the separation distances are considered to be satisfactory. And that, together with the change in topography and setting buildings into the rising hillside, will ensure that there's no adverse impact upon the amenity of neighbouring properties. So in conclusion, I will just touch, very briefly, just on a couple other matters. Drainage. So as you'll see in the report, there was originally some concern raised from the Environment Agency over the site, and that's been reiterated in objections from Town Council and members of the public. that the site was in an area of high flood risk. The applicants have subsequently submitted information and evidence to the council to demonstrate that the application site does fall entirely within flood zone 1. They have submitted a surface water drainage strategy and foul drainage information that demonstrates that surface water flows from the site can be accommodated on site and then discharged into a local watercourse at an appropriate runoff rate. The Environment Agency subsequently removed their objection from the proposals, and the lead local flood authority have also confirmed that they are satisfied with the proposals. The final point is biodiversity. Obviously, we're going from a site that is currently in a greenfield parcel of agricultural land, which will have a degree of biodiversity within it, and we're putting 10 houses on there. There's been a number of reports with the application that assesses the impact of the proposals upon biodiversity, with mitigation as set out within the conditions and within the submitted reports, as well as the high level of additional landscape planting that's proposed. The county ecologist and officers are satisfied that biodiversity within the site will not be significantly or adversely affected. So in conclusion, your officers are satisfied that the application addresses relevant policies within the local plan, in particular policies SC1 and SD1. The site's within an accessible location to the town of Minehead and local services and facilities. There won't be any significant adverse impacts upon highway safety, drainage or flood risk within the area. The scheme is well designed, it's been well thought out, and amenity in the area will in general be appropriately dealt with. So the recommendation is that, subject to the conditions set out within the report and section 106 agreement to provide a sum of £5,000 per dwelling towards open space, sports and recreation within the area, the recommendation is that planning permission is approved.
Lovely. Thank you, Russell. Before I move on to the councillors, we have one public speaker, Donna Collier, who's the agent. Donna. When you're comfortable, if you push the right hand button, the red light will come on and your 3 minutes start when you start speaking. Okay, so whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. I'm Planning Director at Acorn Homes, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the applicant. Fundamentally, the proposals for this modest scheme of just 10 dwellings at Porlock Road in Minehead are both policy compliant and technically sound, which is demonstrated by the planning officer's recommendation for approval. I would, however, like to spend a few minutes to address some of the key matters which have been raised during the course of the application. Firstly, that the site is an appropriate location for development. Minehead is identified as a focus for development, and due to the site's proximity to the built area of the town and good accessibility to the town services, the proposals are compliant with the relevant policies of the adopted local plan. Furthermore, as indicated in the committee report, the scale, site context and distance from both Woodcombe Conservation Area and Exmoor National Park mean that these designations should not be considered a barrier to development in this case. Secondly, I'd like to address the perceived flood risk for the site. Basic flood mapping is a crude tool which is generally applied nationally. As part of this application, a detailed flood risk assessment has been carried out, which uses more detailed data to model the specific local conditions of the site. Expert advice has concluded the site, even when accounting for climate change allowances, is entirely within flood zone 1, which carries the lowest risk of flooding. The Environment Agency agree with this conclusion. Furthermore, the proposals include appropriate management of surface water drainage, which has been confirmed as acceptable by the local authority. As such, the site is not considered to be at risk of flooding and not likely to make flood risk worse elsewhere. And finally, whilst residential uses are commonly located next to cemeteries, the amenity of cemetery users has been considered as part of the design process, including height and orientation of the closest units. The planning case officer reports that the proposals would not be overbearing, nor would it be unduly intrusive or cause disturbance to users of the cemetery. Furthermore, the site has not been identified for use as a cemetery, neither now or in the future, and this does not form a factor for consideration for the application before you. We therefore urge you to approve the application in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just in time. Excellent. Nice timing. Thank you very much indeed. I remind councillors that this application, it comes under our West Somerset planning regime, where the rules are slightly different, and would remind everybody that's why with 10 dwellings, there are no affordable housing requirement, because the trigger, of course, is 11. So I'll leave that thought with you. And the first two councillors to catch my eye were Will and then Andy Hadley, please. So Will.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would like to address the flooding or the drainage issues, please. Russell, have you got a picture that shows the fall across the site? Well, the site is on a slope, isn't it? Have you got anything that demonstrates the slope? Because I think it would be quite useful for the councillors. I mean, if it falls from south to north, which I think it implies it does, towards the road, then I think, can you put up the landscaping slide, please? The implication is that along the roadside was considered to be in the flood zone. I'm not particularly bothered about the flood zone. Particularly what I am bothered about is the water that runs down the slope towards it from the hard surfaces. Because under normal circumstances, you would expect surface water flooding to be dealt with by some sort of percolation. This site won't accept it. So they're proposing to store the water in tanks. But the condition actually says that this scheme doesn't have to be designed or agreed until just before the first house is occupied, and I think that's too late. Have you any idea where they're proposing to put the attenuation tanks? Because sorry.
Yeah, ordinarily, and from experience, attenuation tanks will be placed below the parking areas within the site, driveways, and occasionally within the estate road itself, rather than within people's garden areas and so on. And then they will be connected to one another.
Well, that's interesting, because I always thought that they had to be accessible for maintenance purposes, and if they're underneath a car park, they can't be. Which begs the question, where are they going to be and who's going to maintain them? Because actually, I don't think crates, underwater crates for flood attenuation is at all a sensible suggestion, simply because they're closed, people can't work in them, and they will clog up. So I'm very unhappy about this as a solution for this particular site. And as things stand, I'm going to vote against it on that basis. So we've got the floodplain is, as I said, but it's the impermeability of the site and the clear difficulties, as I see it, of actually being able to deal with any surface water coming off the site, off the roofs, the hard standings. It's going to have to go somewhere, and I'm quite really surprised that the Highways Authority hasn't picked up on this, because it's going to go straight onto the road. And I think if the rest of the committee conclude that that this should go ahead, then I think at the very least we should be looking at condition 4 in terms of when the flood attenuation works are agreed. Thank you.
Okay, Russell, do you want to deal with the queries as they come up?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, yeah. Just in terms of surface water drainage and the design and the basic principles, what the applicants have done at this point in time, they've demonstrated to the lead local flood authority and indeed the local planning authority that there is the opportunity to attenuate surface water flows on site. And although I do appreciate Councillor Wren's concerns over the use of below ground storage tanks, it's not an uncommon solution, because believe it or not, quite a lot of ground within the area doesn't support soakways or percolation. So what quite often will happen is you'll have an enclosedly sealed, totally sealed system where surface water flows that hit roofs of buildings, the parking areas and areas of hard standing, they're actually enclosed with membranes and piping and so on and so forth, and that is all then directed into the surface water drainage system, which directs everything towards the tanks. The below ground tanks then release the surface water that's stored within them into, and it generally has to be a water course at an appropriate rate, which is below the greenfield runoff rate of what would be the field itself. It's not a new fandangled kind of approach. It has been around for quite a long time. It's well proven, and the local flood authority, from my experience, if it wasn't a viable option, they would be raising an objection to that part of the proposals.
Yeah, I mean, it may be technical. I mean, I appreciate the whole point is to bring us down to greenfield runoff rates. What I'm concerned about is whether that's, I mean, technically it's possible, of course it is, whether it's practically possible on a site like this. As for the Lead Local Flood Authority, it is under considerable pressure in terms of its resources. I'll leave that one there. Thank you.
Okay, Andy?
Thank you, Chair. I think Will has just covered my drainage issues, so I won't go over those again. I've just got 1 or 2 points that I would like to raise. First of all, is this site actually named in the local plan as an available site? So that is one issue that I've got. We went through quite a big local plan exercise back in 2016 to assess all the land and everything else that was going to be built on. This isn't there. The second issue is that this is agricultural land. So why are we building our agricultural land when we have already got building land identified in our local plan in Minehead? So I can't understand that one. We say that it's a mile from the town centre and the services. That would be if you went down the Porlock Road. As you know, there's no footpath on the Porlock Road. It's a very dangerous road. It's a very dark road. There's no lighting. It's a very fast road. I don't care whether you say it's 40 miles an hour. They're doing 60 up there. It's a very dangerous road. It has got a local footpath into the back of the estate. I can't remember the name of the road. Home Meadow, that's the one. Well, Home Meadow is a cul-de-sac. So it's feeding straight into the back of a cul-de-sac, which then feeds out into a very densely populated area of Minehead, taking you away from the town centre, which you then have to divert back to the town centre. So people are not going to want to go up through Home Meadow and then walk down into the town. They would want to go along the Porlock Road. So to say it's got a safe and good access to the town centre is, in my mind, a bit of a fallacy. I notice it says that there's local employment. There are jobs in Minehead, I think it's stating on here. Those houses are not affordable for the people who work in Minehead. The wages that are paid in Minehead are low wage. We are a tourist economy, we pay low wages. There is 1 or 2 people who run the various places that are on high wages, but they've already got big houses. They don't need other big houses. And I'm desperately disappointed that they've deliberately stayed below 10 so that they couldn't actually give what we do need, and that is affordable housing in Minehead. I mean, they look lovely, they really do, but you won't be getting Minehead people, I suspect, actually buying them. Didn't mention the foul drainage. I noticed in one of the comments that they say we could get foul drainage via Home Meadow. That is an interesting one because you've got a 6.5 metre incline up to Home Meadow. Yeah, my physics says that water runs downhill, not uphill. So I don't know how you're going to get the foul out of there. Sorry? Yeah, well, I can imagine it probably will be pumped, but it is a consideration. I mean, they're minor points. They might not be minor points. Depends whether you're living there or not. But I do have problems with the agricultural land. The local plan itself has set out where we should be building. This isn't in it. And that Porlock Road is a dangerous road. And I don't think people should be walking down a very dark, very fast, dangerous road to try and get to the town centre, especially in the winter months. And then say that it's got good accessibility to the town centre, which quite clearly it hasn't, I don't believe.
Okay, thank you. Rosemary.
I came with an open mind because I thought I went and had a look at the site over the weekend and I thought, oh yeah, it's not as steep as I thought it was, because I've paid plenty of visits to the cemetery, which is very, doesn't exactly, the water doesn't flow away as I understand. I won't go into detail, and Andy has some very good points that these aren't going to be affordable for locals, which is why I was hoping that the town council will let people walk through the cemetery, because that would give them the opportunity to see what sort of people we are. But these are going to be bought, I'm sorry, by outsiders. And I'm not against outsiders, but it's Home Meadow, there's quite a number of retired people, and this will be perhaps not the lower end of the retirement range, but very nice houses by the looks of things. And I was very pleased that the site had gone from trying to attract 30 houses to 10. I thought much better. Yeah, I still haven't made my mind up about it. But yeah, that local connectivity should be there. And it'd be nice if the town council would let people walk through the cemetery from that new estate. That's the only, and perhaps I should have declared an interest, but it's that connectivity and bringing it into the town. It's quite a way out. Haven't walked up there, have walked to Home Meadow, which is quite divorced from this site. It's up the back of it, not the general direction you would travel. And it's cut off because it accesses from the parks more than from the Porlock Road. So I'm still waiting to hear an argument that says this is a brilliant idea. It's a piece of land. There's no doubt about it. I'm worried that Councillor Hadley has said it's not in the local plan. I don't usually pore over the Minehead local plan, but that rather surprises me because it is within the meterage of being near an estate, but that's Home Meadow, which isn't kind of next door to it. It's divorced from it almost. And the footpaths, yeah, the footpaths, thank you very much for that. The footpath, if you're going to walk on that Porlock Road, you're taking your life in your hands. So perhaps they'll be taking local facilities in line if they carry on that way. But I wouldn't walk on the Porlock Road. It is quite busy. It's the main access from Porlock, and it connects with the A38. Yeah, the A39. Sorry, got my numbers wrong. A39. So I don't see it being, yes, it is next door to Home Meadow, but it's a strange way of approaching it. It really is, because Home Meadow you get from the parks upwards. This is not really accessible from the parks, is it? No. Yeah, the footpaths from Home Meadow is there, but the normal way you'd go would be up the Porlock Road. Yeah, by car. And we don't want that. We'd like them to use the buses, which would be great because more people using that bus, more chance we have of keeping it. All right. Yeah. And again, affordability, nice houses. I'd like one. I can't turn this thing off now. I think I have.
Excellent. Stephen.
Well, I absolutely hear everything that councillors Wren and Hadley and Woods have said, and I have very considerable sympathy with the concerns that they've put forward. However, Mr. Williams has very rightly, I think, drawn attention to policies SC1 and SD1 as the key determining policies for this application. So considering the site itself, drainage and sewage are addressed. The nature of the properties, I think we all regret the fact that they've decided to develop relatively low density 10 large houses, but there's no compulsion upon them to do more than that, however much we might regret that they should. As I've said before, we operate a plan-led system, and I can honestly not see that the applicants have done anything other than to work absolutely within the plan as it is, And I can't, in all truth, see that there are very strong reasons that can be sustained for disagreeing with the proposal at the moment. Back in my youth, it always used to be something that was thrown at us by planning officers. Could you defend this at appeal? It's a test I still, I'm afraid, mentally apply when we consider applications. Were this to be refused and it was taken to appeal, what grounds could we seriously adduce for refusal? And I'm finding it difficult to find any.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to check back with the officer. Russell, it's been suggested that this site is outside of the local plan and therefore has not been previously considered. So would you consider this to be a speculative development?
It's true that the land itself is not allocated within the local plan, but the local plan itself does not allocate sufficient land to cover all of the housing need across the plan period. And that is why the former West Somerset local plan has policies such as policy SC1, so that additional land and sites that are within appropriate locations and meet the policy and criteria tests of SC1 can be released to deliver the remainder of the housing need across the plan period. I share members' concerns over obviously the fact that we have a scheme for 10 open market dwellings and that there's no affordable, but unfortunately policy SC4 within the local plan, which deals with affordable housing, doesn't trigger the requirement to provide affordable housing until 11 or more dwellings are proposed. Thereafter, 35% of all dwellings need to be affordable. Whether that's a play by the applicants on the applicant's part or not, it's not for me to judge. But they put together a scheme that officers have assessed and do feel that, as Councillor Pugsley says, there are no material impacts that are harmful to the point whereby permission should be resisted. The criteria of SC1 have been addressed as I've discussed. And overall, when you look at some of the other benefits in terms of extending the 40-mile-an-hour zone through the traffic regulation order and the provision of a financial contribution towards open space and sports and recreation within the town, there are other benefits to factor in. The housings themselves, some are large, some are smaller. There is variation in the size of the units. And so officers, again, they're content in terms of the mix of housing, even if they are all open market. I will just touch on a couple of other points that were raised as well, if you're happy for me to do so, Chair. In terms of foul drainage, absolutely, we know full well that the land does slope to the north. And through the application, the applicants have confirmed that their intention is to pump foul water from the lowest part into Home Meadow and to requisition a connection into there. The sewage undertakers have raised no objections. There is another option, which is to requisition a connection much further away, but I would imagine that the cost of doing that would probably be too much. Yeah, sorry, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, just to clarify this question of the local plan, I take it from your comments that whilst there has been quite a lot of land that has not been put into the local plan, so we don't have in West Somerset a plan that shows us where building might take place for the length of the plan, but you are content that this particular application is policy compliant.
Yes, correct. Yes. So as I said, there isn't sufficient land allocated within the plan to deliver the number of houses that have been identified as being required over the plan period. In terms of policy SC1 and the criteria that are set out within there, officers are content that the site meets those and satisfies those criteria, hence the recommendation today.
Okay, thank you for that, Ross. Andy, you want to come back and then Stephen?
Yeah, just to ask for clarification on the agricultural side of the land and why we're not using non-agricultural land first.
It's as simple as it is a case of assessing each application on its own merits, and policy SC1 is quite clear, and there's no criteria in there that prevents agricultural land from being brought forward for housing under the policy. In terms of the loss of this particular parcel of agricultural land. It is regrettable, but it is only a small parcel. And overall, in terms of the loss of greenfield sites, that's relatively negligible when we look at the total amount of land that's actually required to deliver the number of houses that is going to be needed over the planned period. And the site is located in a position which is well related to the settlement. If it were more than 50 metres away, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, but that's not the case.
Okay, Stephen?
I was only going to say, Mr. Chairman, that if you look at the top of page 58, the key parts of policy SC1 are stated. And you will note that it states that development within or in close proximity, brackets within 50 metres to the contiguous built-up area of Minehead will be supported where it is well related to local services as safe pedestrian access, respects the local context, does not create significant traffic on unsuitable roads and harm the amenity of neighbours in the area. And I think Mr. Williams has very carefully enumerated the reasons why those issues are addressed and satisfied.
Dawn, followed by Sarah, please. Oh, sorry, Sarah, you were first. My apologies, Sarah.
Yeah, I wanted to just add my thoughts about the, I think, slightly cynical application of 10 houses to get outside the affordable housing requirement. Because if you look at the site and the fact they're going to extend the 40-mile-an-hour limit, I think you said up to the junction. I mean, there's a whole piece of land to the south of it. I know it goes up a hill, but I bet they come back with more houses on that, because this road on the site leads directly into the next plot, and they'll do 10 at a time. And I just think it's a cynical way of doing it. I'm sorry, I think your policy is wrong in West Somerset. You should have made it better so that you had to have affordable houses if you had more than about 4 or 5. We can't change that. And we can't change the fact that the road leads into the next bit of land. Having said that, I agree with Stephen Pugsley. I can't see any reason for refusing this. I would also say that the underground storage of water, I mean, if you didn't do it like that in the Bridgewater area, you wouldn't be able to build anything. They have got loads of it there. And that is how you do it. That is what you do. You slow it down, hold it in a tank, and then let it go when you can. And it's a very common modern way of dealing with this runoff, which, you know, it may not look very nice. I hope it lasts forever, but that is what they do. And that's, you know, it's accepted.
Okay, thank you. I would remind everybody that part of the new unitary council is to write a Somerset-wide plan where the rules are the same throughout the county. That will take some years to achieve, but it is, I think, a desirable piece of work, which will allow people to make their comments on where property should be built, commercial or residential. Dawn.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I have to query this safe pedestrian access. I mean, I don't see safe pedestrian access on this road at all. We have lots of roads in my area like that, and it's not safe to walk on roads like that with the volume of traffic and the speed of traffic. So I know it's been proven supposedly safe, but I'm sorry, you know, I despair of some of the decisions on safe pedestrian access that get claimed. I wanted to ask, what's the bus service provision from that main road for people coming out of that development? And also, is there any requirement in the West Somerset area for any active travel aspects to be added to a planning application? So safe cycling, safe walking, is that part of any application that you bring forward?
So as within the officer report, the nearest bus stop is approximately 400 metres from the site, and the service is an hourly service. So it's not as regular as you might like, but it's certainly not irregular. And if people wanted to utilise that, then they'd have ready access to that. In terms of active travel and encouraging modal change and so on, there are policies within the local plan that do require travel planning and so on, but the development of 10 dwellings doesn't trigger the requirement for a travel plan to be made or contributions to be required to try and encourage modal change from using the private motor vehicle to walking, cycling, using bus services and so on. As desirable as it would be, and unfortunately, if we don't have a policy on which we can use, then we can't insist upon that.
Norman.
I probably know the answer to this one already, but I've got to ask it. As it is West Somerset's plan. It's under the 11. It's first phase by the look of the road. Can we put in a condition in there that says if additional development takes place off this site, being serviced by the road from this site, then it will tot up the total accommodation units and therefore trigger affordable housing allocation?
The short answer, Councillor Cavill, is no. Unfortunately not. We don't have a policy again that can require that, and I don't think it would be lawful to impose such a condition. It's unfortunate, but yeah, that's not the case. That said, as is noted in the officer report, a pre-application inquiry did come in for approximately 30 dwellings within this area, and that was pushed back upon for various reasons. One of which I would imagine would have been landscape impact on rising land. But yeah, you're right to note the layout of the estate road, but what happens in the future will unfortunately need to be considered and determined at that point in time.
Okay, Ms. Collier, I don't normally allow an exchange, but is it a point of clarification? In that case, please use your microphone.
I'm very aware that this is beyond protocol. I fully appreciate that, but I can clarify the 10-unit question and the reasons for why we reduced the scheme if that helps members come to a conclusion. So the original concept scheme was 30 odd houses, which extended southwards into the field adjacent. We took that to consultation with local residents, and we felt that that was not going to be a very popular thing to do. And we took their comments on board. We also did some technical surveys and found that there are ecological reasons not to build that far south. That would involve quite substantial mitigation, not impossible, I presume, but we decided that we wouldn't go down that road. So in doing so, we looked at the top parcel, and in coming to that decision, there was conversations with the council about density and reducing the density on that site being a semi-rural edge. And having explored that, the numbers were arrived at in order not to over-densify the site. And given the shape of the site, if we were to add any more additional units here, that would be very difficult. So our initial concept did include affordable housing, and we've reduced it through consultation, technical reasons, and to reduce the density, if that helps at all.
Okay, thank you for that. I hope that makes things clearer for the members of the committee. Any other members want to come back on anything?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I did make reference in my speech to an amendment to one of the conditions should the committee decide to approve this. I don't know when the right time to raise that would be. Okay, well, on condition 3 says prior to the construction of the building, samples and materials should be submitted to the local authority. But condition 4 says prior to the occupation of the buildings, works for the disposal of sewage and surface water drainage shall be provided. I would like to substitute in condition 4 the word construction for occupation. So prior, so that we get the planning officers get a clear understanding of what the drainage arrangements are going to be before the site is dug up and it's too late to do anything about it.
Okay, Russell, you for you?
It's not the usual wording that we would adopt, but if members are happy with that, then I don't see any reason with it. It would tally with other conditions that are in the list there. So yeah.
Okay, so page 67 of the officer's report, paragraph 4, a change of the word occupation to construction. Is that correct, Bill? Okay.
Yes, Chair. At the moment, there's no proposal for anything on the table. Well, Councillor Pokes. So in terms of Councillor Wren's suggestion for the change to condition 4, if a proposer were to come forward to approve the application with that amended condition, and that was seconded, then that could be then voted upon.
Stephen, my
As I
apologies.
believe there is nothing currently on the table, I would like to move the recommendation with councillor Wren's change to condition 4.
So, you're proposing that and you're seconding it, or are you proposing it? You can second it. Yeah, of course you can.
I suppose, yes, I'll second that. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Right, we have a proposal that's been, it's been proposed and seconded. Can I see those in favour of approving this application with the change to condition 4, the word from occupation to construction? See those in favour, please? 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. Any against? Well, never let it be said, that the councillors do not vote the way they wish.
We're missing someone abstain.
So it's 2. So Andrew had a.
Sorry, you're right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
7-2?
Yeah.
You happy?
7-2.
The maths works. Excellent. Russell, thank you very much indeed. We'll just do a quick swap. Yes, 2 minute break. Thanks, Norman. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Councillor Cavill has left the meeting because of this last item. I'm going to reconvene the meeting and hope that we can be, because this is a report for information, I hope it will be reasonably swift. I have an ulterior motive. Okay. Good afternoon, Simon, and welcome to the Planning Committee. 4:45. This is a note for information.
Well, at 4:45, Joe, you'll be glad to hear that you're not determining an application or being asked to determine an application for 1,450 homes. As you say, it is merely an update to an update that members have previously received. So to wind back, this is all to do with the hybrid planning application for 1,450 homes at Monkton Heathfield. Members will recall, or may recall, the main application being presented to the Planning Committee in September of 22, and that application being deferred for the applicant and the council to go away and review and assess the proposed 14 reasons for refusal with a view of a resubmission that overcame those issues. Now, we are now 12 months on from that September 22 deferment. We gave an update in March, which was effectively, can you give us another 6 months? So that further 6 months has also elapsed. So I'm here just to update you and receive any questions with regard to where we are currently with the scheme. As is customary, I do have a few slides. I didn't want to come without any. So just to remind members, this is the site that we're talking about. What was commonly known as Monkton Heathfield Phase 2 is now known as Langala Park. This was the master plan that was considered in September 22. And these were the 14 reasons which I won't go through in detail, but if you name an issue, it's probably on this list. So we had, in March's update, we had an emerging master plan, the tropical fish. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that has been the basis for our ongoing discussions. As I said, the site has been branded as Langala Park. And this slide indicates the work that has gone on since September 22, the workshops, the big moves, as it was described, to remove the relief road that went through the site, quality review panels, various meetings and workshops with the council and various stakeholders, very specific technical reviews of particular matters, through to where we are today. And where we are today is a master plan that obviously doesn't look significantly different at first glance, because it is the same shapes of site. The components are more or less the same, but the work that has gone into revising this master plan, the thought in terms of placemaking and the considerations to green infrastructure and making this the flagship for the Garden Town movement in Taunton is all represented by this one slide and the immense amount of detail that lies behind it. Emerging sort of images from the design and access statement, which is being produced to support the new submission, indicate images like this. And you would have seen this image before, but it indicates the presence of a district centre and the focal point of the development, where education, retail, services, a mobility hub all co-locate to provide the heart of this development, with a further local centre out to the east. So hopefully my report speaks for itself. It is brief, which is unlike me, but in even briefer terms, the summary of my recommendation is that I'm requesting a further 6 months to continue working towards the revised submission, and to maintain, albeit it's unlikely to be used, the option to delegate a refusal should current progress not continue. It is fully expected, Chair, that within that 6 months, the revised submission will have been made, and therefore that will kick off the normal reconsultation and reassessment stage. And it may be that in 6 months we are able to give you an update, which is basically a timeline through to the committee process to reconsider the application in its entirety. So I'll leave it there, and if there are any questions, happy to take those, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. We have one public speaker, which is the agent Ian Dewson. Mr. Dewson. Same rules as before. Get yourself comfortable, push the right-hand button, red light comes on, and your 3 minutes start when you start speaking. And welcome to my committee.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to address you again today. Some of you will recall that I spoke at both the September 2022 committee and again in March. As a reminder, and for those of you who are relatively new to this committee, I was appointed as the agent for this planning application in August last year. This application seeks to deliver an important and substantial part of the SS1 allocation. Pre-application discussions properly commenced in 2017 prior to submission of the planning application in December 2021. Before submission, the applicant attended a number of design review panels, engaged with the council's own master planning exercise, and undertook public consultation. The site is highly complex due to a number of competing issues which need very careful handling. Adjusting to the more recent restrictions imposed on this development by nutrient neutrality has been a particularly difficult challenge to overcome. In September last year, I asked this committee for more time as consultee responses were still being received and reviewed. Quite frankly, the application wasn't ready to be determined. Since that time, my clients have entered into a planning performance agreement with the council, which has allowed a more formalised and proactive way of working together. As part of this agreement, the applicant has committed additional funding to the council to assist with officer resourcing. Since the PPA was put in place, the applicants and their team have presented to 2 further design review panels and the Garden Town Advisory Board, engaged with Create Streets, and have attended regular update meetings with parish councils. In addition, numerous technical meetings have been held with consultees, and at a meeting with Natural England 2 weeks ago, it was agreed that an on-site solution to nutrient neutrality now exists. This was a very important milestone for the application. In my view, the PPA arrangement agreed in October last year has brought about a very positive and welcome change, helping us reach the point where revised information can shortly be submitted to the council. Following this, we hope that the application can be brought back to this committee with a positive recommendation so this important strategic allocation can be delivered. As I stated previously, we would very much welcome the opportunity to brief members at the appropriate time prior to a formal decision being made. Thank you very much, and I very much hope you can support the recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jewson. Simon, we're being asked again to extend the period by a further 6 months, which will mean an 18-month period has elapsed. Are you confident that we are now in a position where the applicant is actually paying attention and dealing with the queries as they come? Because what I'm trying to get away from is I wouldn't wish to see this to be a constant on my diary every 6 months, a further 6 months. So I'm minded that the committee is quite possibly unlikely to just blanket agree 6 months every time you come back to us and say, can we have another 6 months, please, on behalf of the applicant? Because I don't think that will happen, because this work needs to carry on and we need to get this branch of housing built and built out. So are you confident that sufficient progress has been made and is likely to continue being made on this important site?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's an understandable point. I'm increasingly confident that we are on the home straight, although I think I said maybe at the first update that it will take as long as it takes. And the work being put in now will hopefully pay dividends come the submission of the revised application. What I'm loath to do is receive an application that's still half-baked. And what we're trying to do is resolve as many issues as we can before the revised environment statement, master plan, etc., are sort of set in concrete by the applicant to the point where they then submit. So I would sincerely hope that in 6 months I'm not here asking for 6 months based on no progress having been made. I think my full aspiration is that I'm sat here saying that the revised application has been submitted and telling you when we're coming back to you formally as a committee item for the application to be determined.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. Members? Stephen?
I'm happy to move the recommendation at 1.18, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Sarah, thank you. That's been proposed and seconded. I hope the messages have got across. I hope they're quite clear. Can I see those in favour, please?
Yep.
Right, that's unanimous again. 8 on this occasion. There's one's left. Okay, I'm going to leave you in the tender arms of Sarah on our.
You'll need to ask for a vice chair to be appointed for this item.
Oh, okay. I need to appoint a vice chair for this last item because I need to leave. So I'm going to suggest Stephen Pugsley. Can I? I'm going to suggest that you chair this last item on the agenda because I need to leave. Okay. So are we content with that? Yes, we've all voted. Yes, excellent. You unanimously voted to chair this item, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed, and I will see you all very soon.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll stay where I am. So we'll move to agenda item 9, which is the appeal decisions. Sarah, are you taking it?
Are you still on there? Thank you, Chair. Just to summarise the appeal decisions that have been received since the last committee, there are 3 of them. Pleased to say they've all been dismissed. Interestingly, all dealt with by the same inspector who's obviously been doing a bit of a blitz on West Somerset at the moment. There were no applications for costs either. I'll just run through very briefly the sort of key points of each. First one is for a single self-build sustainable carbon neutral dwelling at land adjacent to the meadows in Hatch Beecham. There were two issues identified by the inspector. First one being the effect of the proposal on the character and appearance of the area. And whilst the inspector said that the proposed building would be set behind a wall, it would be of a low height and have the appearance of an agricultural barn, it nevertheless represented the erection of a large building, and furthermore it would have a new garden which would have sort of domestic paraphernalia in it, and the inspector concluded that it would have an urbanising effect on the countryside and would result in the fragmentation of fields and fail to reflect the physical features of the site. And the inspector also held that planting that was being proposed by the appellant would not actually reliably screen the development, particularly in winter months, nor could its survival be guaranteed in the long term. So the inspector found that it was contrary to a number of policies and also the national planning policy framework. The second issue was whether it would, the site was in a sustainable location, particularly in regard to accessibility of the site and services and facilities. And the inspector found that the location would not provide a suitable location for proposed dwelling, given issues of accessibility. And in coming to that conclusion, the inspector took into account various facts put forward by the appellant, including the possible impact on his own business, affordable housing, self-build and the 5-year land supply. However, the inspector concluded that the adverse impacts outweighed the benefits. So that one was dismissed.
Yes. Councillor Wren.
Is this a committee decision or an officer decision?
These are all delegated.
Any other comments on that one? If not, we'll move to 890.
Yes, my apologies, I should have said. Second one is for a 2-storey side extension to increase the conference floor space at the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Taunton. And again, the inspector had 2 issues. One was the effect of the proposal on the character and appearance of the building, including whether it constituted a non-designated heritage asset, and also the impact on the conservation area and the setting of listed buildings. The inspector found that the appeal building, having some historic interest, and despite the fact it had been separated from number 19, that it did actually constitute a non-designated heritage asset. And given the proposed flat roof, due to its horizontal emphasis, the large mass and bulk of the first floor, it would be excessively dominant and out of place in terms of the roofscape. Furthermore, it would also be visible and harm the street scene, particularly when looking from Mary Street House, which is a listed building, and its setting. The inspector therefore concluded that it would impact on the conservation area and the listed building, and was therefore contrary to both policy in the development plan, also the framework. The second issue was the issue of protected species, in particular bats. And the inspector found that contrary to the appellant,
that it was actually quite likely that bats would be present. And in the absence of an ecological survey, the inspector had insufficient information to be satisfied that the proposal would not harmfully affect the habitat of bats. Therefore, the inspector disagreed with the appellant that the matter could be left to be controlled by Natural England's licensing regime. Rather, the inspector agreed with the council that the presence or otherwise of protected species and the effect of them by a proposal needs to be established before planning permission is granted, and the matter could not be left to a later stage. And therefore, the proposal also conflicted with policies in the plan and also circular 2005/06 and the MPPF.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from that? Okay, then we'll move on to the third on page 94.
Thank you. This last one is for the erection of a single-storey dwelling at 3 The Greenway Terrace at Kingston St Mary. Again, in this case, the inspector actually had identified 4 issues. First was the effect on the character and appearance of the area, including the AONB. The inspector found the proposal would subdivide the site and actually fill much of the site's width. It would also remove hedging and a bank and replace it with hard surfaces and hard-built form. The inspector held that this would result in harmful urbanisation of the site and surroundings, undermining the natural beauty of the AONB. The proposal also did not reflect the strong linear form of the existing development and would appear cramped. It was therefore contrary to policies DM1 and CP8. The second issue was on the effect on the highway. Given the limited space on site, vehicles would have to either reverse into or out of the site, possibly actually involving manoeuvring on the highway itself. There was also restricted visibility for those leaving the site, as well as the drivers and pedestrians in the vicinity of the site. The inspector therefore concluded it would have a harmful impact on highway safety. The third issue was in relation to living conditions of adjacent occupiers, especially in relation to outlook, light and privacy. The proposal did not include the first floor windows and also included a fence. So the issue of overlooking and loss of privacy, the inspector didn't think it was going to harm those 2 issues. However, the inspector did find that although it was a bungalow, it would include quite a large high roof that would be very close to neighbouring gardens, which the inspector concluded would have a harmful and dominating overshadowing effect on the garden in neighbouring gardens. And therefore he concluded that the living conditions of the occupiers of adjacent properties in respect of outlook and light would be harmed, and therefore it was contrary to policy and the MPPF. And the final issue was whether or not the proposal will provide adequate living conditions for the future occupiers of the proposed building, particularly in regard to open space. The inspector found that the site was very limited in size and limited usability of the outside space, that it would not provide adequate outdoor living space for the future occupants, and therefore again was contrary to both development policies and also the framework. And that is it. Thank you.
Sorry, so that's a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask whether, and I don't want to keep you here, but those reasons you just read out, were they different from the reasons it was refused, or were they just expanding? I mean, the inspector can presumably find on different grounds if they want to. I wasn't quite sure, because we obviously refused it on certain grounds, and I know you can't expand that if you have any sort of hearing. You can't say, oh, I've now thought of this, but the inspector presumably can, is that right?
Sorry, it is normal for inspector to obviously focus on the reasons for refusal put down by the council. But it is possible if they feel there is another one that has not been raised to add that in. But in these particular ones, it was the issues raised by the council.
Okay, are there any other points, ladies and gentlemen? If not, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance and thank you for my moment of glory.